Okay, here we go. It is 7 o'clock at night. It is Sunday evening. I am Ron, and this is a Sunday evening special edition of Sunday Morning Live with Ron. How's everybody doing this evening? Highly glad to see you back here again tonight. Thank you for being so supportive. It really helps me. So, what is this? What are we doing here? I had a major catastrophe this morning, trying to do this live this morning, and it did not work at all. It crashed about 5 minutes in. Hopefully we will not do that today. If it does, I do have this show recorded, pre-recorded in one take, but I do have it pre-recorded, and I'll just load that up so everyone can enjoy it, all 6 or 7 of you. But in the meantime, we do have a format. Our general format is we like to do 3 things here. 1, I'm going to show you the new pictures that are on the site this week. 2, we're going to talk a little bit about better photography. Today our subject is aperture and how the aperture will affect your pictures. Okay. And 3, I'm going to go over some of the menu settings that I use and how I have my Sony a6000 set up when I go out shooting photos. Okay, in case you're wondering, that beautiful picture of my backyard roses, that does come from my Sony a6000. So there he is. But first, the first thing that we like to do is we like to show you this week's new images. So here they go. Okay, I have to do one more little adjustment so I don't try to, no, here, this one, there. I'm often trying to click on the video box instead of the actual image control box. So this first one is called Sand Flowers. Like so many of my pictures from the beach, this one is from Pacifica. I can't quite nail down where though. I'm going to have to talk to the friend that I went there with and figure out where I was so that I can get a street address. But we were at a little coffee house called the TikTok Coffee House to see some world music on a Sunday afternoon. It was very, very nice. They were a very good band. I wish I could remember their name. I've got to start taking notes when I go on these shoots because then now I have to talk about them when I get home. But a beautiful, nice little world band, and then we went out straight across the street and out onto the sand from there. And these little low flowers were sitting there. You may have seen an earlier shot that had grasses anchoring the sand. Well, this is called sand flowers. Just some pretty little flowers. All right. That's for later. This one is called Hopi Woman. It is from the DeYoung Museum in San Francisco, which is in Golden Gate Park. And she does have a companion sculpture called Hopi Man. Unfortunately, the Hopi Man did not come out well, but the Hopi Woman, I really liked this picture. I liked the composition, the nice bouquet on the pictures in the background, a person standing there, and I really like how the sculptor captured the spark in the eye there. I spent some time in Arizona and New Mexico, which is where the Hopi are. It's an interesting culture. Very, very interesting peoples to study if you're into Native American studies. Here we are again back at Pacifica. This one is Rockaway Beach, and it's actually looking from Rockaway Beach back towards Maury Point. This one is entitled, Where Shall We Crash Next? This was a January trip out there. It was windy, it was cold, but it made for some really nice pictures. As you can see, it was far clearer than many of my other shots that I've been in Pacifica. And the waves were up. And I really liked the way that they would come in and they would crash over here on this rock. And then they'd come in, they'd crash all over this rock. And then they'd crash up on this rock. And then they'd crash up on this rock. And then they'd crash over in here in the cove. It was quite fascinating. I love sitting and watching watching the surf. That's one of my favorite things to do when I was in Hawaii. I don't surf, I don't get out in it, because a friend told me everything I need to know about surfing, which is, there's a reason that there's surf there, and that's because there's rocks on the bottom. That's everything I need to know about surfing. But I do enjoy watching the ocean, particularly when the waves are bigger. Our next one is called Reach for the Sky. Now, I don't know whether this is a hold-up, or whether they're just being aspirational and inspirational. Yes, Lee, I can see your comments now. Are you seeing me okay? See, I don't know that I see how many people are on. Yeah, 2 people are on, you and me. But I gotta go back and find my picture. So this is, I really liked, they've got a couple of buds that are starting to open up. So there's just this little spots of red. I can't get my cursor on it because it's over here but next to the edge. And the sky and the clouds. That's just a really nice picture. This was taken over on the side of my house here in Concord. I have a grandiflora rose, which is where they get long stem roses from. It's over 6 feet tall. It's taller than I am. And has these beautiful bright red roses. So, again, this is Reach for the Sky. And this is called Hidden Views 1. Hidden View 1. Took this through a hole in the fence on a walk right here on Willow Pass Road, right sort of next to my house, about a block down. And I like this effect of shooting through a knot hole in a wooden fence, that I think I'm going to start looking for opportunities to do more of this. This idea of seeing a different world just by looking through the cracks of the things that are around us really appealed to me. So this is Hidden View number 1. It's just an empty lot. Beautiful ficus of some sort there, and then weeds and a wall. But it was very, very peaceful, very calming. I liked it. So just to review quick, Hidden View 1, Reach for the Sky, Where Shall We Crash Next, Hopi Woman, that's for our lesson on aperture, and Sand Flowers. So those are our 5 new pieces. Those will be going up, honestly, they'll be going up tomorrow morning. I don't think after the day that I've had, now doing this show for the 3rd time today, myself, that I'm going to be able to keep going because I'm getting kind of sick of being at the computer and playing with this today. But tomorrow morning, I will get these all loaded up and onto the site. And they'll be available to look at there. When I say the site, of course, I mean ronolcottphotography.com, which goes with Ron Olcott Photography, because I am Ron. Just to tell you what we're doing here, in case you just are coming in, not that anybody's coming in, but this is a special Sunday evening edition of Sunday Morning Live with Ron, because we had technical problems on Sunday Morning Live. So now we're doing Sunday Evening Live. Now, what we like to do with our live broadcasts is we do three things. One, we introduce those new pictures that I just showed you. Two, we're going to talk a little bit about how to make your photography better. And three, I'm going to show you a little bit about my camera that I use when I go out shooting professionally. Now, please don't think that just because I have this nice, relatively fancy camera that I'm going to show you in a little while, that you can't take good pictures, because you can. All right? There is a saying in photography, an answer to the question of what's the best picture, what's the best camera to take this type of picture? And the answer is always the camera you have with you. Okay? Now, all of us, or many of us anyway, are traveling around with these things. Okay? We've got a smartphone. We have a camera that is more sophisticated than the digital camera that I paid $800 for 15 years ago. Okay? This takes better pictures than that. Okay? And this is an iPhone 8. The new iPhone 11 Pros and the top of the line Androids right now, they're taking in the 20 megapixel, and my Sony a6000 is only 24 megapixels. So you're really not suffering. Okay? If you want to get into the things that we talk about here, about the exposure triangle and working with aperture and your shutter speeds, there are apps that you can download for that. Okay? Just look for a photo taking app in your app store, and that will help you. Okay? But today, we're going to talk some more about the exposure triangle. Now, if you remember last week, we talked about the exposure triangle. Okay? And then it has three pieces. One is the aperture, or how big the hole is that the light is coming through. Obviously, a bigger hole lets in more light. Okay? One piece is how fast the shutter opens and closes. Okay, so that's your shutter speed. And the third piece is how reactive is your sensor to the light. And the term we use for that is ISO. Okay? Where does that come from? International Standards Organization. International Standards Organization is what ISO stands for. Back when we used to use chemical film, they came up with standards so that you could buy Fujifilm or Kodak film or Joe's film, and if it was an ISO 100, it should be equally reactive to light, and you could set your camera up the same way and get, theoretically, the same picture. Because you couldn't tell what you took back then until you took it home and got it developed. So that's what ISO is. But that's not what we're talking about today. Today, we are talking about the aperture. Okay? And the aperture is expressed in terms of f-stops. And I don't know what F stands for. I apologize for that. I should have learned it. But basically, it is an inverse ratio. Not to get mathematical, but that's why you'll often see it expressed this way, as an F with a slash, and then your f-stop number. Okay? So this is an f4. f4 is a quarter of the available whole, okay? So f1, you would be getting 100%. But because there's a mechanical aperture, there's always a limit on your lens as to how low your f-stop will go, okay? But as you can see, f4 is twice as big as f8, which is twice as big as f16, okay? Why do you want to use these different f-stop levels? Well, a couple reasons. One, you let in more light, okay? When you let in more light, you can, because we've got that exposure triangle, you can take faster pictures, faster shutter speed, or you can use a more reactive ISO, okay, which is ISO 100 or so, okay? Or you can let in less light if it's really, really bright. When I was out shooting, recording the middle of the day today, it was very, very bright, okay? And I had to shut down the ISO, the aperture on the camera quite a bit in order to get that. Now on my PC camera, you'll see that it kind of averages everything. There's some really blown out white stuff behind me over here. See how the tops of the trees are what we would call overexposed. You can't make out any of the details there. And as you get down here, they're a little overexposed. And then as you go into the tree directly behind me, that's pretty good. And actually my face is not bad right now. I might have put up a fill light over on this side. That's the house side, and it's kind of a little dark. Oh well. Shows up all my wrinkles. Anyway, here we can't control the aperture. Over here, this is a picture, live picture from my Sony a6000, and we can control the aperture. Now, I want to show you what happens as we change this number here. I have my camera set right now in what is called aperture priority mode. That means I can change the aperture, and the camera will automatically adjust the shutter speed, expressed as 125th or 160th of a second, depending on which way the breeze is blowing. Okay? And I also have it set to automatically adjust the ISO. Okay. Now, you're not going to see the shutter speed change much. That's very bad for as bad as my S's are. Because of the breeze and the fact that we're shooting live and doing continuous focus, it is going to detect the fact that those shrubs are moving a little bit, so it's going to try to stay really fast. But let me show you what happens when I start to change the f-stop, okay? You see, if I take it down to f8, okay, f6.3 is as low as I can go right now with the zoom all the way back onto those flowers. Those are all the way across the yard, by the way. I'm using my zoom lens this afternoon. So you can't really tell much from that, but let me zoom out. Okay. And you can get the effect that as I zoom out and I refocus, you see over in that back corner to the left-hand side of my screen, looks like it's the left-hand side of your screens, you see how things are a little bit fuzzy? Now that I've zoomed out a little bit, it should let me get the ISO just a little bit lower, all the way down to f5, which I believe f5 is the lowest, widest stop that I can get. So the other thing that you can get with your aperture is the wider the aperture, so the lower the f-stop number, the shallower the depth of field. And what does depth of field mean? You see how the posts and things that are here in the foreground are fuzzy, and that back corner back there on the left, further back away from the shrubs, that's fuzzy too. Well, that effect is called bokeh, B-O-K-E-H. Okay? And bokeh is a very lovely soft effect. It allows you to really bring out your subject, okay, and let the rest of the picture sort of blur away. Okay, we saw that on our picture Reach for the Sky. Okay, you notice this has a really nice bouquet. Okay, these few right here are very, very sharp, but things in the foreground are a little bit soft. The clouds and the sky and these trees over here on the right, all the rest of this stuff is very soft. So that tells you that I had a wide open aperture to get a shallow depth of field. Okay. Now, as you close in your aperture, see what happens here on the live shot. As you close in your aperture, okay, we started at f10, so we'll go all the way up to f20. Okay. So this now is half the size of the aperture that we were looking at earlier. One thing you will see, because it's getting to be evening, I chose this time specifically because this is what's called the golden hour. It's the last hour before sunset, when the light just gets really warm. And when I take the camera off the stool, off the tripod, to show you how the menus work here in a little bit, you're going to see some nice sky shots that I'm looking at. I'm looking towards the sunset right now. But okay, I closed down that aperture, and you notice how the stuff in the foreground now is much sharper. That fence is sharp. The table over there is sharp. Okay. The post in the foreground is sharp. The lamp, still not quite completely sharp. Not sure if we will get there completely. F25 is as low as this particular lens will go. So how big a range of aperture you have is dependent on the lens, and we'll have a whole episode or 8 on lenses as we continue on. But there you saw it refocus. I mean, continuous autofocus, and we'll talk about that when I talk about the menus. But so we have a much deeper depth of field, but it lets in much less light. Okay, see down in the bottom left-hand corner, instead of 125th of a second, which we had at f10, we're now down to 1/20th of a second. Okay, and if I gently touch the shutter, it should tell us what ISO it's going to go at, and it's going all the way down to ISO 3200. So it's trying to be very, very sensitive, okay, because we're losing the light, okay. Okay. Whereas if I bring it back up to where we started, to about f10, there we are, back up to where we started at f10. You see we're back to 1/25th of a second. Still deciding that, again, because things are moving back there, It's making the ISO very high. 3200 is very reactive. Okay. Okay. But it's shooting it at 125th of a second. Okay. Uh, Pardon the autofocus, sort of jumping around there a little bit. That little hand on top tells you that the breeze, or simply the earth moving, is causing the camera to shake a little bit, so that it's using its automated steady shot, which is just Sony's name for shake resistance. But so that is aperture in a nutshell. Okay, so the important points to remember there is the smaller the number, the bigger your aperture, the more light that's coming in, and the shallower your depth of field. Okay? The bigger the number, the less light that's coming in, and the broader your depth of field. In other words, front to back. How much of the picture is going to be in focus? There's always going to be a focus spot, but it's a question of how much is in focus. Okay? Now, you can see electronically anyway that the webcam, it uses a very, very, very high f-stop number. Okay? Because I'm in focus. The tree behind me is in focus. The kettle, which is much closer, is in focus. The trees all the way in the back there that are blown out up at the top, 15, 20, 30 feet up in the air, those are still in focus. So that's a mark of a very high f-stop, or a very small aperture. Okay? So again, less light, high number, more light, low number, because it's a ratio. It's 1/. Okay? So, we're 2/3 of the way through. We have talked about our new pictures. We have talked about how to make your pictures better. Okay? And as I said, even if you're using your smartphone, don't despair. For example, like on my iPhone 8, I have dual lenses. Okay, the new iPhones have 3 lenses. By controlling which lens, okay, when I use the close-up lens as compared to the wide-angle lens, those have 2 built-in different f-stops. You also can get apps from your app store that will allow you to set all of that on your smartphone and actually take pictures. There are even apps that will allow you to change the focus and effectively change the f-stop after the fact. That's all done digitally, and you can get some strange effects when you do it with a program. I know, I'm a programmer. But be that as it may. Hold on just a second while I take this guy. So the last thing that we have to do is talk about the Sony a6000. Now, he may look a little bit different this week than he has weeks in the past, and that's because I've got my great big telephoto lens on here. This is a 55 to 210 millimeter lens. It's a lot wider, longer, because I have a hood on it to keep stray light from coming in from strange angles. And now my hood doesn't want to go back on. There he goes. All right. So now we got the hood back on it. Okay. So, what do we want to talk about on the Sony today? Today we're going to talk a little bit about the setup. Okay. You will see that in addition to our mode dial that we have here, I've set up to do something special with this, so I don't want to pull it too far out. But in addition to my mode dial that I have here, set to A for aperture, okay, I have a bunch of other buttons up here. This button is my shutter release. I can't program that one, okay? But this button over here, this button I have programmed to control my focus mode, okay? So if I want to focus on something different than the autofocus picks, I can quickly switch over to manual focus. And let me show you what that does here, looking from the back of the camera, okay? So we'll look up here at our night sky. And now I press that little button, okay? You see that now I've got my focus modes. I have continuous, automatic, where it decides whether it's going to be a single shot, single shot, which is what I usually am set on. When I'm shooting still photos, I shoot single shot autofocus almost all the time. Automatic, where it decides whether it's continuous or single shot. I can force it into continuous mode. So if I was taking pictures of something moving, okay, if I was following somebody on a bike with my camera, okay, and I wanted to get it continuously in focus, okay. So for example, if I shoot over here, try to focus on my, nope, it's too close. I won't be able to do this demo. Try to focus on that light pole back there, okay. You can see I didn't completely reset, okay. So if I focus on that light pole back there, okay, and I hold it down, I am in continuous focus mode. So that will stay in focus as I get closer, as I get further away, even as I point to something else. As long as I hold that focus, okay, you'll see that the light pole stays in focus regardless of what I'm pointing at, okay. If I press my little magic button again here, I go to single shot focus, okay. Once I set my focus, okay, I will set that, okay. Once I set my focus, this time over here, right on the edge of that thing, okay. If I move away from there, okay, that's going to stay in focus, but if I get closer, it doesn't, okay. Light pole is a better example because it's close enough that I can actually get closer to it, okay. But you see now, as I get closer, that because I locked my focus, okay, it doesn't stay in focus. I'm set for a single shot. That allows me to focus on the thing I want and then reshoot and do something a little bit different like that, okay? So that is focus mode. The other button that I want to show you on the camera today is right here on the back. Again, a bit hobbled by all of my cables, okay? You see on the back we've got a whole bunch of buttons, okay? A flash button, a menu button, automatic exposure lock, that's programmable. We've got this dial, we've got playback, we've got all kinds of buttons. But the one we're going to talk about today is this function shortcut button, this little FN, okay? And in the menus, and we looked at those deep menus last week. Jump back to the camera. So this is the menu, okay? So you've got all of those topics at the top, okay? And each one of those topics has submenus and pages under it, okay? So we're not going through all of that today. But rather than have to thumb through all of that stuff every time I want something, I have this function menu. So when I hit the function, I get a shortcut. I can do things like set my focus area. Okay. Right now it's set for a small dot, a flexible spot, and as you can see, I can move my spot around. And as you saw earlier, I had not recentered my spot. Okay. One of the things that I try to do is when I get done with every shoot, try to get this back to what I consider my default settings. Because things happen fast. Life happens fast. Okay? So you want to be able to grab your camera, pull it out, and know that you've got a reasonable shot at getting the picture that you want without having to thumb through all these menus. Okay? So we'll set that. The other things we have here, another place where I have quick access to my focus mode. Okay. This is flash compensation, and we'll talk about compensation because it does affect aperture. This turns the flash on or off. This is the drive mode. Drive mode simply tells me, am I taking a single shot? Am I taking shots as fast as I can while the shutter is depressed? Do I have a timer, okay, which is either 10 seconds or 2 seconds, okay? Do I have a timer and then shoot 5 shots? Do I have a timer, shoot 3 shots? All right, so I've got lots of strange things here, okay, including bracketing, automatic bracketing, okay, and we'll talk about bracketing as a way to take shots in a later video, okay. But again, in the interest of keeping things simple, when I'm taking pictures, I just keep it on single shot, okay, and then I can control the ISO. All day today, I've been shooting with ISO auto, but I can actually manually force this into a specific ISO. So if I stick at ISO 200, okay, force it to lock there, you will see that as I shoot up at the sky, and if I was shooting at, 132 at 3200, before I was at 125th of a second. Well, now I'm actually shooting more into the sun. I'm at an 800th of a second. Okay. And again, because I'm in aperture priority, my aperture has stayed fixed. Okay. And then the other things I've got programmed, and again, I can change each one of these. Metering mode is, am I looking at a spot? Am I looking at the center, irregardless of the spot? Or am I looking at sort of averaging everything? And that's, how does it determine how to preset that exposure? How is it going to adjust the shutter speed in the ISO? So before I forget it, let me go back to ISO. Oops, too much. ISO, set him back to auto. As I said, I like to keep everything set to a default so that when I'm taking a specific picture, I can change it. Okay. But you see here, when I had that forced to 800, it was taking a 13-second exposure. I was looking over there. And now it's 0.6 seconds. Okay. Why is that? Because it's taken the ISO back up to 3200. And you can visibly see that the shutter goes for a half a second. Okay, we'll do some shots on the tripod later to show you what some longer exposures look like when we get to shutters, which will be next week. Okay. And then finally, to round this out, we talked about metering mode. White balance, I just set that to automatic. But if you know you're in certain conditions, you can force it to do daylight, okay, in shade. See, that's much closer to the actual color of my house because I'm shade, cloudy, okay. If we're shooting under incandescent light bulbs have a very warm tone, so it automatically makes things bluer, okay. I'm shooting with a floor lamp, which is warm and white. I haven't ever looked at all of these. Floor lamp, which is cool and white, okay, which are actually the two floor lamps that I use as fill color, okay. A floor lamp that is just a neutral daytime light, okay, or one that is daylight, okay, and white balance for if we were using our flash. Underwater, ooh, I didn't even know I had an underwater. So as I said, I haven't looked at all of those. Being colorblind myself, if I need to change the color of the photo, I tend to do that in post-processing. And I just set it to automatic white balance and let it figure out the best thing for the raw image. Nope. Now, here we go. Okay. DRO, auto HDR. HDR is high definition resolution. We'll talk about that. It has to do with bracketing. I have to read and find out what DRO is. Okay. And then you can set creative styles. I don't have any creative styles. I ignore that. Okay. So that's my function menu on my A6000. As usual, I tend to talk about 45 minutes on this thing, no matter what I do. So, I wonder if anybody ever joined over here. Yeah, 000 on Instagram. And me and Lee on Facebook Live. So, that's our show. I am going to film and I will upload. If you want to bear with me, I'm actually going to do it now before I get off of this broadcast, but that's the basic show. But I am going to move out there to my table that you can see behind me. If I switch over to the A6000 and point it at the table, you can see back there I have the table set up, and what you probably can't see is on the table are my gloves and my pen and the picture that I'm going to sign to Katie. But before I do that, let's get through the bulletins. Just to recap today's episode, I showed you the 5 new pictures. They are Hopi Woman, Where Shall We Crash Next, Reach for the Sky, Hidden View 1, and Sandflowers, 5 pictures this week. We talked about aperture and how aperture can affect your pictures. One, by making them brighter, by letting in more light, or darker, by letting in less light. And also how that changes the depth of field. In other words, how deep in the picture, front to back, your focus point is. Okay? A wide open aperture makes a very shallow depth of field. A very small aperture makes a very deep depth of field. Okay? So, if you're shooting landscapes, you tend to shoot with small apertures because you want things to be in focus from the foreground all the way off into the infinite distance. If you're shooting, for example, portraits or close-ups of something, you tend to go with a very shallow depth of field because it's very nice to have your subject very sharp in focus and the things around it in the foreground and the background to be soft. Okay. And then, some photographers, I don't do portraits, but some photographers who do portraits then, brush and make it even softer in post-production. But you can control that optically by changing the aperture when you take the picture. There's a lot of this stuff that you can fake in post-production or improve in post-production, if you will. And I use post-production. Ansel Adams used post-productions. Okay. Ansel Adams, I saw a quote from him this week. Ansel Adams always said, a great photo is built, not taken. So, yes, you get what you can get from the camera, and then you also get what you can get when you process that photo afterwards. So we'll talk about photo processing. That's going to be way down the road after we get through the exposure triangle and any number of things that you can control in your camera, composition. Okay? And then we'll talk about how you can use tools to help fix that up after the fact in later episodes. So, and then we talked about two of the menus that I use. One, that button that I have set to allow me to change my focus mode. Primarily, it lets me change it from automatic to manual, because there are times when I'm trying to do an automatic focus, okay, where automatic focus tends to pick the thing that is in front. Okay? And I don't always want to focus on the thing that's in front. I may want the thing in front to be blurry, and I want to focus on something behind that. So you have to switch to automatic focus and really fine-tune in and get the specific focus that you're looking for. And then we talked about that function shortcut button across the bottom there that allows me quick access to 8 or 10 of the functions that are built into that huge menu system, so that I can change things like my metering mode and where my focus spot is, and whether or not I'm using flash. I can change those fairly quickly using the function button without having to go through the 14-layer menu. Bulletins. Katie is the winner of the April giveaway of You and Me Kiddo, which we're going to see in a second while we sign it. But I don't know where Katie is or who she is. So if you are Katie or you know Katie, get a hold of me by direct message, either on Facebook or Instagram or wherever you came in from, or through the contact on my web page, ronolcottphotography.com. I'll ask you a couple questions to make sure that you're the person who gave me this bad email address, but the email address that you gave me isn't working. So if you want the picture, you have until next Thursday night to claim it. So get hold of me. If I haven't gotten hold of Katie by Thursday, which would be the 7th of May, then we're going to hold another drawing live next Friday. And we'll draw April all over again. May drawing is open now. May drawing is Straw Hat Happiness. We're going to look at that in a little bit of light out here in a second when I get out to the table. I've got a copy of that to look at. And then finally, or maybe not finally, the May is open. I extended my 25% off sale. Use code WFH2020 to get 25% off your entire order. If you are on my newsletter, be sure you look at the newsletter, and I apologize, I did not get a newsletter out this week. A busy week. So look at last week's newsletter. But there's a code in there. That code is still good. It gives you a better discount than the WFH 2020. So look for a better code if you subscribe to the newsletter. If you subscribe to the newsletter now, which you can also do when you enter the drawing, it subscribes you to the newsletter. So you will also be able to see that code in next week's newsletter. It's extended through May 10th through Mother's Day. Okay. And then the final bulletin is next weekend, Saturday and Sunday, May 9th and 10th. I will be doing a virtual festival. I was supposed to be going to Novato to do a live festival, in-person festival this next week, and of course it got canceled and or postponed. Don't remember. They're canceling and postponing right and left. But the producer of that festival is putting on a virtual festival, and I've signed up for that. As I get more details throughout the week, I'll be posting that both on my Instagram at Wanderlust Gallery and on my Facebook at Wanderlust Gallery Fine Art, as well as putting a notice up on the notification bar on the website, ronolcottphotography.com. Come in, follow me, all of those places, Instagram, Facebook, sign up for the newsletter. That's how you'll learn what I'm doing, what's going on. Be able to be the first person to see these new pictures. Be the first person to learn in more in-depth stories about what I'm thinking, what I'm planning. And as I already told you, I always try to give special deals to my newsletter subscribers. They're special people. I appreciate them. Those are the bulletins. That's what we covered, our normal 3 things. So that's really the end of the show. But we're going to take a little field trip over to that table behind me. And we're going to do a live signing for that copy of You and Me, Kiddo. And I'm going to show you the straw hat happiness. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to disconnect from my audio. You're not going to be able to hear me, but I will be over there. So I may try seeing if we can pick up the audio off of the camera, because I'm taking the camera with me. Oh, I don't have him set as an audio source. Okay. Anyway. We go over here. Let me disconnect myself, unhook myself, climb out from behind the computer, and we will move over There we go. Hope to see you at the virtual festival next week. Hope to see you Sunday morning live next week, 8 a.m. Pacific time, Sunday mornings. I'm out here in my backyard, although I'm thinking of doing this virtual festival from my front yard and maybe letting the neighborhood enjoy some of it too. Yep, that's the other one. But we'll see. I haven't worked out the details of the festival yet. But we'll get that worked out. So for now, I want you to be safe. I want you to wash your hands. Stay home. Take care of yourself. Take care of others. Become the person that you'd like to meet. Bye. Well, that's a great ending. If only my